Okay, let's get kicked off. So welcome to the panel discussion today, which is jointly hosted by Fortinet and Tufin and cordially supported by Energy West Energy. I'm Pam Sear, Senior Vice President of Business and Corporate Development at Tufin. My team and I are responsible for building and executing Tufin's partnership strategy for ISVs and business consultants, in addition to driving our corporate development function. We are excited to be joined by Dr. Jürgen Tusch, Head of Telecommunications from Energy West Energy, John Jacobs, Vice President of Global Solutions Architecture for Fortinet, and Reuben Harrison, CTO and co-founder of Tufin. But with a bit of housekeeping, please feel free to enter any questions you might have inside of the chat window, and we are going to hold time for Q&A at the end of the session. So first, I'd like to kick off the session and the discussion by brief introductions by our panelists. Dr. Tusch?
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Good morning, everyone. As head of telecommunication from Energy West Energy, I'm responsible for the development and provision of the right telecommunication services for the largest power distribution operator in Germany. This is a 100% subsidiary of our company, West Energy. And I have to say that in times of Energiewende or energy transition, where we try to get rid of the carbon footprint in the energy system, to be a telecommunications engineer or to be part of the telecommunications story, it's a very cool time for telecommunications engineers, I can tell you. And I think we'll prove this in the course of this discussion and this session.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jacobs?
Good day to everyone. So I do have a jingle out there if anybody wants that stuck in their head. So, you know, cybersecurity has been, now the single industry that intertwines with every other industry. And I started my career in technology, as many people I think did, in the late 1990s, building LAN networks, moved on to build and operate some of the largest IP networks in the world with level 3 communications. Moved into the vendor space a few years after that. Proud to celebrate my 7th year here at Fortinet. And while we've expanded tremendously in those years, the company mission hasn't changed. And that is the aim to secure data at rest and in transit through every instantiation, whether that's cloud, OT devices, client, everything in between. And I can't think of a more poignant industry, an asset, than reliable power generation. So, and its transmission. So really looking forward to the discussion, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. Mr. Harrison?
Thank you, Pam. So my name is Reuben Harrison, and I'm CTO and co-founder at Tufin. We started the company just about 15 years ago, and it wasn't an existing market. The idea of managing security policies was just a subset of the security vendors and the security products that were available these days. And over the years, we've gained tremendous success with the vast majority of the largest companies in the world using our technology to manage security policies. And throughout that period, I think we've developed unique knowledge in what it is and why it is so difficult to manage security policy. And we also created some interesting solutions in the space. So I'm very proud to be here today with this excellent company. And let's get to the questions, and I'll try to provide my best answers.
Thank you very much, all of you. So let me start with a situation summary that will hopefully get the discussion rolling. As we are witnessing now more than ever, global organizations are in a constant state of flux due to rapidly changing social, health, environmental, and economic factors. As an observation made, due to the massive changes in almost every business forced by COVID-19, it has been said that many companies have experienced 5 years of digital transformation in 5 months. In a bid to support business continuity and sustained growth, and accounting for the dramatic shift in the working pattern, IT teams are ramping up their operations rapidly. This may lead to the trade-off of expanding the network edge significantly and an explosion of the attack surface. posing threats to critical infrastructure and assets. So let's start with Dr. Touche. How is cybersecurity important for your role in these changing times in the organization?
Yeah, Pam, as you mentioned, we have the change process twofold. We've got organizational change, because you may know that we currently merge with E.ON, our grid business. So that's the organizational part of the change story. But probably even more fundamental is the change in the energy system. And that's the change of the energy transition, where we say we want to get rid of the CO2 footprint in the energy system by replacing the traditional power plants by renewables. I mean, that's easier said than done. And what you see here in the first slide, this is something like the technical concept we believe is the right way to go to achieve this. And as you can see in the headline, there are three cornerstones of the energy transition, or Energiewende, as we say in Germany. We want to achieve the decarbonization. And to achieve this, we have to decentralize the energy system. Decentralization means replacing 100 of big power plants by today over 1 million of small power plants. And the whole thing can only be coordinated by the digital transformation of the power grid. And so this is why these are the three cornerstones. If you look at the picture, okay, the background, everything is green. That's what we want to achieve, although I think this picture is not from Germany, but anyhow, it's green. We see in the middle the smart grids, and that's, so to speak, the foundation of the energy system of the future. And we all know a foundation of a house should be rock solid, and that holds true here as well. So we have to get this right, these smart grids, and that's basically the distribution system and the transport system. And in order to make it work, we need a lot more of ICT, information communication technologies in the grid, to make it more observable, controllable, to keep track of the very strong power flow fluctuations due to the renewable generation profile. If there's a lot of wind, you've got a lot of energy. If there's less wind, you've got less energy. And at every given point in time, you have to keep the balance between generation and consumption in the power grid. If you don't keep this balance, finally the system will crash and you end up with a blackout, which we don't want to have. So that's why it's so important to get the smart grid part right. And then you can build on top of that the new energy world applications like a virtual power plant. And the virtual power plant basically is an IT system which controls thousands of windmills and PV systems trying to emulate a traditional power plant using the portfolio effect. And this is all done by controlling the turbines due to secure and available communication connections. And I think everybody realizes this, the connections or the telecommunication services are really critical. They are part of the critical infrastructure. And the grid control engineers who run the power grids, they rely on our telecommunication services to keep track of what's going on in the power grid, to switch the switches, the transformers, and the windmills, control the windmills day and night, 24/7, even in the case of a blackout. So if you think about the disaster scenario, a blackout in a country, no more power, then the control engineers need our telecommunication services to restart the energy system. So there's no excuse. We didn't have any power, we couldn't deliver. We cannot make that call. We have to deliver even in the case of a blackout. And when we move one more slide further on, we see that in this environment where the telecommunications really, or the availability of the telecommunication services, they determine the availability and the security of power supply in a country. We all know that modern societies are even more depend on the security of supply. And that's why we have to make sure that we have maximum security in our telecommunications infrastructure. Because unfortunately, the grid control system, which is basically the brain of the energy system, so you have to protect it. But this brain is no longer an island. So there's a lot of connections to the outside world, which basically is unsecure. So we have to control the windmills. There's data coming in, generation data, cutoff signals going out, weather data coming into the grid control system for the forecast for next day. There's a lot of communication going on with other utilities because of the power flow dynamics in the system. And there is also the likelihood of attacks to the energy system is increasing. We all remember the case of the Ukraine power outage, where a cyber attack brought down the whole energy system of the whole country for one day. So we don't want to have this. We want to prevent this from happening. One important point is that the increasing use of IP technology in our OT systems doesn't make things easier, because IP systems are pretty open and there are a lot of tools to break into the system. So what we believe is in the advances in IT security technology, and we want to apply the latest technology, and we actually do this right now as we speak, to secure this system as best as we can, because I think it's worth it, because it really determines the availability and security of supply of a country.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Touche. I mean, that's an incredible example of massive digital transformation, and I think highlights the importance of security. So let's shift over to John. John, what's the most commonly observed trend with Fortinet customers around the role of network and security infrastructure in the digital transformation?
Yeah, well, let me first say, as someone who knows just enough about the power grid and electricity, that I'm in awe of how it functions reliably. Truly a dynamic system. Organizations of every size are embracing digital innovation to accelerate business, improve customer reach, improve customer experience. The three most common things we see today are, I think the one that's become obvious in the last 6 months is remote workforce. And the remote workforce, with their connection to both corporate assets and the increasing load of software as a service, or SaaS applications. Number two would be migrating applications and workloads into the public cloud. This has just really enabled people to be more flexible, be more dynamic with both the amount of processing and where they process information. And then number three would be managing the proliferation of IoT and OT type devices. The number of devices coming on the network is growing at a staggering rate. And industries like energy really highlight this. So, and they're such a great example of large dynamic networks that are just constantly evolving. What was true one day, the rules could be completely changed a day or a week later. And with these changes come new and expanded security risks. Organizations are trying to cope with new perimeters, once that were simply a hardened perimeter that you could create policies and rules to control access in and out, multiple attack vectors, more complicated attacks, and more complicated application environments. Linear scale is no longer an option. That was really sort of in the beginning realm of networking and security. One of the primary tenets was just grow quickly. And now it's about being able to adapt and adopt a holistic strategy that starts with security as a fundamental core, and then building a framework around that connects all these devices and does so in a secure fashion. We've seen rapid adoption of the security fabric. We call it the Fortinet security fabric. That shares threat intelligence, it shares alert information, and most importantly, it works with a large and growing number of technology partners and integration partners. Tufin's a wonderful example of that, but I'll let Reuven talk a little bit about highlight a little bit and expound on how we integrate with their technology and to really better security.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And over to Reuven. Reuven, what should organizations be aware of while sort of balancing the trade-offs between delivering these new solutions rapidly, yet sacrificing potentially security and becoming non-compliant?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of things I'd like to say about that. First of all, we live in a connected world. Now everyone's been saying that for a while. It's not news. But as we see, the acceleration of connectivity is exponential. It's more technologies, more heterogeneous technologies, as in the case of energy, for example, where we see operational technology being connected to the network. The same network that connects our on-premise networks and our cloud networks and IoT and edge computing. And I know Dr. Tush has a reservation. We may need to keep some separation there, but eventually it's all part of the larger internet. One way or another, everything is connected. Now, if you compare this to a traditional network of the past, like 5 or 10 years ago, the complexity is so much greater than it used to be, and it's impossible to manage such a complex environment using the traditional methods that we've been using for so many years. We believe that automation is critical, automation of security policies. And if you can automate, if you've already made the investment to transition from a manual change process to an automated change process, then you can survive these digital transformations in a much easier way, because now you're making the changes faster. They're not an extra burden. They're just done as part of the automation processes. And moreover, you can also guarantee segmentation and compliance as part of the changes. So if you've built that into your automation processes, you're in a very good position to make these digital transformations in a much easier way.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate that. Excellent. Well, it's pretty clear that, to sort of state the obvious, CISOs across the board are very, very concerned about the challenges they're facing due to digital acceleration. And unfortunately, often security is an afterthought in this race to integrate diverse multi-vendor networks in an organization's infrastructure. It's going to lead to gaps that can increase the attack surface. So a question I'll pose to the whole panel: what are some common causes that lead to security and productivity challenges in most enterprise organizations? And why don't we start with John?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think the root of this, Pam, comes down to the idea that while there are standards for certain aspects, like STIX and TAXII, these are acronyms for threat sharing information, there's still no ubiquitous communication protocol for security infrastructure. And this alone just creates tremendous complexity. And we can all agree that complexity is the enemy of consistency, and consistency is a key ally to effective security. We see just simply too many consoles, too many interfaces from isolated point security products. There are a number of great products out there. The market's continuing to evolve. We always encourage people to investigate, but the idea being that they have their own management interface, sometimes their own policy language. So you mentioned earlier, but I'd say one of these initial call to actions is that consumers demand a full and open API, so a programming interface that's available so that communication in and out of these products can be maintained. The attacks themselves are simply more numerous and more complicated. And oftentimes now we see them target the actual gaps between these disparate systems. So the second sort of call to action here is, a drive to a unified platform in solutions like TUFIN that can help fill those gaps in the consistency of rules across vendors and across devices. And I'll say that the last part of this would be the skills shortage. We see a fundamental gap and shortage of individuals who are talented and have this skill set at their disposal. In response, earlier this year, we made our network security expert, our NSE program, available for free, all the way up to just below the expert level. So that's NSE level 1 through 7. We just passed the 500,000 certification mark. I think that was a great benchmark for us. People can go to training.fortinet.com, but I think fundamentally, more and more vendors are going to have to put these types of resources out there so that users can accelerate their education. This is a constantly changing environment where education has to be key. We're also, as a note to that, before the end of the year, we're going to have on demand. So we're trying to align our training services with the speed of the current world. And we're going to make on demand blocks of training available so people can just, swipe a credit card, have virtual labs hosted in the cloud, so they can spin those up and actually continue their education. So orchestration tools can help automate many of the functions and reduce this idea of human error. And with a joint offering like Tufin and the orchestration suite and the Fortinet Fabric Management Center, IT teams can centrally manage complex networks. And the policies, this is the most critical piece, is policies can be orchestrated across the enterprise with the assurance that enforcement happens where and when it's directed. And I'll let Reuven expound on that. He's certainly the expert in this space, and I'll pass it to him.
Thanks, John. I do really like your comments. A lot of them resonate really well with what we've seen in the market. Some of the challenges, to answer the question and continue your line of thought, John, some of the challenges that we see that lead to security challenges are the heterogeneity of today's enterprise network. And if you compare that to how the security teams have shrunk, they were much larger 10 years ago, right? A lot of teams have become smaller. The amount of knowledge and expertise that is required to manage such a vast heterogeneous network is way beyond the capacity of most security teams today. So the people on the security teams understand the principles of security, but they're not experts in operational technology or in cloud or various other types of technology. So the organizations like Energy are left to trust the vendors, the security vendors. Okay, now Fortinet being an excellent example of a security vendor who understands security and brings very strong security controls to their customers. But like many other security tools, it comes without the policy. If I come back to what John mentioned, it's the user's responsibility to define the policy. So this is sometimes referred to as the shared responsibility model, right? Maybe more in the cloud, like the cloud providers own the infrastructure and the users need to define the configurations and configure the policies. But it's the same with most security tools. It's the user's responsibility to define the policies. And as we say in Tufin, your security is only good as your policy. But the thing is that it's very hard to define policies. And this is what we've seen over and over again throughout the years. Most of our customers find it extremely difficult to define the policies because, again, there is a split brain with regards to who's responsible for what. The security teams are, again, they're very knowledgeable about security, but they don't know the business needs of the different applications out there. In the case of energy, for example, how do the wind turbines need to communicate? Who needs to have access to them and for what purposes, right? And which applications do they need to speak to? That's something that you can't expect a security team to be experts in. So there's a split base of knowledge there that needs to be communicated across application teams, application owners, project managers, security teams. And these communications are often where security breaks down. Because what we see in reality is that because the difficulty of transferring that information, policies are often left overly permissive. And what that means is attack vectors. It means exposure, and it means that there's a greater risk of being having a data breach or an actual security incident of some kind. So we've seen this in various ways across many of our customers, but I think more interestingly is to hear from the users themselves, to hear from Dr. Tush, who's here with us today, about how he sees this, because eventually he's the guy who's responsible for security. So Dr. Tush, I'm really curious to hear your opinion about this.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. I mean, we have this saying in German, you hit the nail on the head. I think that works in English as well. With your observation, when we started to, I have to comment on that, so I will come to my point later. When we started to develop the application layer firewall together with Fortinet, and that was 5 years ago or so, we found out that we cannot do it alone. Alone means just in the telecommunication realm, because what you said, we have to understand how does the application, the grid control system, communicate with the windmill. So we have to understand the application logic in order to be able to program the firewall the right way so that that doesn't block the normal operation, but it does only block the abuse of this link. And this was only possible by tearing down silos in our company. So we said, okay, we can only solve this problem when we sit together. So bring the grid control engineers, the automation engineers, the telecommunication engineers, and the people from our colleagues from Fortinet to develop the functionality into the product. And this is also a modern way of, so you need companies which are able to work that way, to break down these silos. Because you cannot just say, we as telecommunication people build a firewall, then nothing will work. It will block everything and everybody's unhappy and they will throw it away and they lose the option to bring in a good, very good security level. So that's very important to have this in mind. So you need an open culture in your company to really make use of modern and efficient security solutions. So that's a very important one. It's a non-technical one, but it is at least as important as the technology, which has to work as well. And the point regarding the attack vector or attack surface, I mean, if you think about Energiewende, that means, for instance, you've got a wind turbine in a rural area on top of the hill in an unsecure environment. And then we've got a connection from this unsecure environment into the grid control system. That means, and we just don't do this once. It is done 10,000 times, 100,000 times. So the security people, they get shocked because they say, are you crazy? You are just enlarging your attack surface. Why are you doing it? So we have to do this because our application environment requires this from us. And also we have to use IP because otherwise it won't be scalable. And this means that we really need this highly efficient security solutions to be able to run this environment with a really large surface of attack in a secure and responsible way. Because we remembered the first slides, this directly is related to the security of supply in a country. So that's what we always have to bear in our mind when we make decisions. How do we do things? We don't want to have the situation as we had in the Ukraine or in other countries. I think in Brazil last year, there has been a similar event. So this is the environment we're working in. And that's why we need these state-of-the-art security solutions. And when I listen to you, John and Ruven, I'm once more very confident that we can achieve this, because there are so many good ideas and solutions we can take on board to make it even better as we have it right now.
Yeah, I would want to comment again on just what an amazing change in an industry that, you know, rewind some short number of years ago and you would have, say, a fossil fuel based power plant that most of the devices there were unlikely connected to a network. There was simply a hardened perimeter and, you know, data flowed in and out that you controlled. So now to see that so distributed and people may be aware, and they should be now and should be, is every one of those, you know, those windmills, those giant windmills has IP connectivity, right? It's connected to a network, feeding information, taking data back and forth. Yeah, truly a great example. So I just wanted to chime in with that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an incredible example, and even to highlight, John, the point you made, in addition to cybersecurity skills shortage, which I applaud Fortinet for doing all you can to try to bridge that gap, it's pretty clear that, misconfigurations or lack of visibility can lead to these security threats that would allow malicious actors to sort of jeopardize not only our intellectual assets, but cripple critical infrastructure, right? So that our industry, the network and security industry, we're at the forefront of preventing attacks and helping to remove these security gaps. So I'll give us an opportunity to talk a little bit. How are your respective organizations' offerings helping your customers to secure their applications and their infrastructure? And John, I'll let you take a run at it first.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. It really, our mission and our core starts with the Fortinet security fabric. We believe that enables end-to-end security framework. And for effective security, again, going back to the same idea that organizations have to, and this will be at a different point for different organizations, but they have to shift from the idea of a hardened perimeter, what was a single hardened perimeter, to maybe multiple hardened perimeters, to now data that is spread everywhere. Disparate systems running on other people's compute in public cloud or their own private cloud. Our security fabric is an intelligent architecture that interconnects discrete security solutions into an integrated whole solution of detection, monitoring, blocking, and remediation. So each of those components is also critical, that it isn't enough to just say there's an alert or there's a problem. It provides true integration and automation across the infrastructure to network segments, individual devices, appliances, virtual appliances running in the cloud. The fabric builds on our vision of converged automation in a unified platform. So if I touch on the idea of convergence, this really applies to network and security. We believe there's a fundamental shift, and that is driven by the convergence of these two technologies or thoughts, which has been the Fortinet objective since our early days, to reduce the number of devices required and thus impacting and lowering the cost, lowering the complexity. That means that you can apply consistency and consistent security policy from an OT or an IoT device to the client, data center, cloud. Even our infrastructure devices like layer 2 switches or wireless access points, we do delve into that area of networking, but they're woven into our security fabric so that they become a policy enforcement point. They're not simply a device that just forwards packets. The platform idea relates to those devices and our partners, so technology partners acting together and setting the groundwork for, I think, what is one of the, we had this term called zero trust network access. I used to joke that zero trust was, well, you just cut the cable or turn off the power. I mean, if you don't trust something at all, why let it communicate to anything? So thankfully, marketing has sort of shifted, and we've now have this idea of intent-based network security. So the idea of intent-based that enables automation because of the device, because of the user, using things like Tufin's Secure App, knowing now what an application is versus simply poking holes in a firewall, even if it is application aware. To Reuven's earlier point, so many times we see errors caused just by very, very allowing security policy. So, and with that, we can leverage our fabric ecosystem for third-party integrations. And we touched on that skills shortage, and that's a common theme that comes up, but automation as a part of the fabric really makes it possible to do both predictive security and faster response. So the new norm is that there almost should be an expectation of some type of event. We want to minimize the impact of that event, and part of that minimizing is just the time it takes to recognize, to understand, and control what impact it can have. For example, we can respond to an alert inside of any one of our platforms and then push it to Tufin's Secure Change platform. And if you look at our website, our marketing materials, We sort of apply this in 4 different areas or 4 different pillars. In the interest of time, I won't delve into details of each of them because they're somewhat self-explanatory, but security-driven networking, I talked about that. We believe that's come into its 3rd generation from simple stateful devices that said block or allow to application-aware firewalls and devices that said, I know what this is. I don't really just see a port and a protocol anymore. I can understand and decode that protocol. And now moved into the idea of a converged network with security. The idea of intent-based network access, I'll let Ruben talk a little more about that, and it is a key component of how we view network security as a whole. Dynamic cloud security, which is top of mind for everyone. Cloud migrations, most of them today are public cloud migrations. The giant corporations, you know, the Azures and AWS and Google and Oracle have done an amazing job of building infrastructure that people can leverage very easily, usually very cost effectively to put workload into a cloud quickly and then scale it to wherever their business demands are. And then last would be the security operations. So compliance hasn't gone away, and I think will become even more diligent in the years to come as more and more devices, more data, more users are connected. So compliance is a key piece, but complexity is the other component of that for security operations. So if you're running a security operations center or a SOC, we want to be able to push as much automation into the security fabric to gain actionable intelligence and then also pull in threat intelligence and have insight. And again, I'll hand it off to Ruben from there and talk about how we deal with that in the security operations or the SOC type environment.
Thanks, John. Again, to continue your ideas, I think, first of all, as a co-founder, and a lot of the technology that we bring to the market today was stuff that I was part of in the creation of. So I'm super, nothing makes me more happy than seeing something that we brought to the market which is used by customers successfully and actually helps them in their daily jobs and improves security. So there's a lot of that. There's probably more than I can discuss in a couple of minutes. But I'd like to just highlight a couple of things that I think stand out. So the first one is how we've created this abstracted policy management platform that sits on top of the leading security providers in the market today, like Fortinet, right? And integrates with their APIs, like John mentioned. Everyone wants to use APIs, but APIs are always changing, and we kind of took that task away from the end user that might not be familiar with APIs and may not want to be familiar with APIs. And we've wrapped around all these different APIs a platform that kind of unifies security across all these different vendors. So creating that abstraction in itself is, I think, very useful as a solution. And now recently we've expanded that beyond firewalls to additional types of technologies with our alliance, like for example, vulnerability scanners and many others as well. So the idea today of customers don't want all these different consoles, again, like John mentioned, they want an ecosystem where the major elements of their security policy management are integrated and consolidated in an easy, nice user experience. So we've got that, and that was a huge undertaking because it requires us to keep up to date with all these different APIs and solutions, and also the upcoming solutions. Right, there's new technologies, and that brings us to cloud and Kubernetes, and bringing these other new types of technologies into our umbrella of the unified security policy. A couple of other things that I think stand out are the whole idea of automating security policies, which I think has taken off so tremendously, and we see today more and more large organizations that want to automate the security policies end-to-end, zero-touch automation. And we have quite a few customers who are doing that today, which basically means the end users in the organization being anyone in the organization or specific application owners or project managers, they can go into a self-service portal and say, I need this connectivity for my application, and we just take care of the rest. And that alleviates so much of the complexity of the security policy management, which again is proving to be very beneficial for our customers. There's a life cycle for policy management. So you grant access, and at some point you want to decommission that access when it's no longer needed. Granting access in an automated way speeds up, accelerates the business. So people love that. Decommissioning access is something that people just don't do because no one's going to ask you to remove access that they don't need any longer. It's just not something that anyone cares about. But we can detect that automatically and remove these types of unneeded access from your policies. So keeping that attack surface minimal and maintaining the least privilege principle at all times. And we've taken that an extra step. We've created the automatic policy generator, which can actually look at traffic and construct the policy from it, like reverse engineer the policy from the traffic, which sounds a little bit weird, but if you keep in mind that writing policies manually is so difficult, the automatic policy generation is actually a very useful tool. And just to complete, maybe the last thing to complete the story is Secure App, which is looking at the whole idea of security policies and connectivity from the application perspective. And more people are doing that today. That's something that we came up with maybe 10 years ago. And it's become standard by now. People don't think of individual connections. They think of business applications. And within that, there are connectivity needs. And that's very much related to the concept of intent-based networking. The intent is the business application. How it's actually implemented is a different story. And it may also change very frequently, right? We see more and more digital transformations, and what's the technology that is there today may be replaced by a different technology tomorrow. But the application itself remains the same, although the application can also go through changes and it has a life cycle. But you want to separate these two things. You want to abstract them from each other, and Secure App does that in a great way. And I think Secure App is a good lead to Dr. Tush, because I think that's probably what they're using in Energy to manage the connectivity for the wind turbines and the other elements of their network. So Dr. Tush, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. Well, probably I would like to tell a little bit of the story we walked through when we started this, because it's always good to hear the good stories from vendors. But if you're a user, then sometimes you experience something different, a slight deviation from the story. So we started roughly 5 years ago with this work, and we said, well, let's learn from the IT colleagues. Let's talk about application security at the perimeter. It's a very basic thing, I know, but we didn't have this. And then typically you run an RFP and say, okay, who can deliver this IEC 104 functionality, which is the protocols we use. IEC is our standardization body for energy, for the energy world. And finally, we found out that there had been products out there which claimed to do this, but we tested them, and unfortunately the implementation was not as comprehensive as it was required for our application. And then it turned out that we said, well, who's going to develop this together with us? And then Fortinet said, yes, we're going to do that, which was a really good sign. And then that was a very good cooperation. So this was really the cooperation. We already mentioned this skill shortage. And I'm pretty proud of our people in my team and also in the team of Westnetz, where we really had a direct communication between the development engineers in Canada, because the requirement spec was created by us, and then we walked through the testing and everything. And it has now been, well, 2 years in full operation. So all the windmills in the Westnetz region are controlled via the 104 firewall from Fortinet. It's not just one, it's many. And then we said, okay, great, we've done that now. Now let's think about how do we manage this environment? Because everybody liked this functionality, so they bought firewalls, which was good for the Fortinet sales rep. But then we said, oh, how are we going to manage them? And then we quickly realized the beauty of the firewall is only as beautiful as the management system, which makes sure that you have a consistent rule-based environment in the firewalls, because one rule misleading can ruin the whole thing. Okay, we said, yeah, that's no problem. Tufin is on the market, so let's buy the Tufin product, and then everything is great. Okay, same story as 5 years ago. It was great, the product, but unfortunately, it was missing the application layer functionality which Fortinet had implemented for us. And then the same question again, Tufin, would you like to bring this functionality into? I remember a call with Ruven a year ago, roughly, when I talked about our energy vendor story, and he was, at least my impression was, he was really interested in that. And the fact that Tufin now is implementing this functionality shows me probably my assessment was right. And now we get this environment. And so we make sure that the rules are consistent. And there's one more thing which is very important for us. The management of the rules is much more cost effective. As all organizations, we are under cost pressure. And by using the Tufin management environment, the request process for rules and so forth and credentials is much easier, much more effective, and cost saving. So, so to speak, we get more security with less effort in the operational expenditure. So that's basically the story. But we found out we have to build our environment from the basic parameter. Now we're moving the way up with the management system. We are also working together with the colleagues from Fortinet on an OT SIEM, so security incident event management, specifically focused on utility environments. And this is also a specific development or a configuration which is required to make this work in our OT environment. So this is a little bit the story we walked through. And we are very happy now that we've got an environment which is probably, I would not say close to perfection. You always can improve things, but at least we made a huge step with these two components, and we are moving forward this direction.
Excellent, outstanding. It's really nice to hear from you, Dr. Tusch, how Energy is getting value from the solutions, and I hope our panelists enjoyed it as well. I'd like to maybe see if we could switch gears and look forward a little bit. And I'd like to maybe start with you, Dr. Tusch. What do you think, what practices from OT can an IT team learn and implement, or even vice versa?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm originally also an IT guy. So 20 years ago, I worked for Cisco. So coming from the IT world, and you know, one thing which is common for IT guys, they are patience is probably not the strongest asset they've got. So, but if you come into the grid business, then things have really to be thought through, because we talk about security of supply, and just to try something out and it breaks and the city is dark, that's not the right option. I mean, so you have to learn to become a little bit more patient. But you've got all these ideas from the IT guys in your head, and I think we can generally you can say that the IT world is probably a decade more advanced in terms of technology than the OT world. OT people will probably beat me. It's probably 10 years or 12 years, I don't know, but there's a gap at least, and we can really take on board the concepts from IT and transfer them into the OT world, like we did with the application layer firewall, with the SIEMs, and this is not new stuff. It's just the application of concepts in a new world, which now requires all these concepts, because the digital transformation is taking place, and a digital transformation without having security in your mind, this is not a good combination. So we have to do that. So that's really a good point. Probably the topic IT people can learn from the OT people, at least to achieve some more understanding, is that the OT world is a pretty cruel one. As I said, we have to deliver our services even in the case of a blackout. Nobody else will deliver services. The carriers are down, everything is down, the mobile networks are down, everything is down. We have to deliver. And that requires that we carefully select technologies. For instance, if we put our grid control system into a public cloud, okay, this wouldn't be a good idea security-wise, but also in the case of a blackout, you need your grid control system to restart the energy system. But if you put it in the cloud, it's gone, and then you don't have the tools to restart the energy system. Not a good idea. So, I mean, sometimes IT people say, well, the OT people, they are not modern and they always rely on this old stuff. But there's a good reason in certain applications to really refer to standalone infrastructures, because this is required. That's not because OT people are living 20 years behind or something like that. It's just because of the physical technical requirement. So that's a little bit more this understanding thing, which probably IT people can learn from OT people, but at least OT people can learn from IT people a lot of good technical concepts which we can apply, as we saw in this discussion.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I mean, clearly for a while there, the OT and IT coexistence are critical and important. So thank you for that. So as we're coming towards the end of the hour, I've got another couple of questions for John and Reuven, and potentially I'd like to ask you to not only answer the question, but maybe include a brief call to action for the panelists so we can get to the Q&A. So John, let's start with you. So what can customers expect from Fortinet Security Fabric in terms of measurable outcomes?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. I had a conversation, well, I guess it was earlier this year, but it was with probably one of the largest software as a service companies. And they said, I said, how long does it take to enact a firewall change? And thinking that, they're good. It will take, minutes, or they're going to wow me with this number or reply. And he responded with 2 weeks. 2 weeks to change a firewall policy. And that is, if you think about that, of course, there's no way that keeps up with the scale of business. So, from our inception 20 years ago, Fortinet was focused on driving down the cost of inspecting and securing data. And our roots as a hardware company have enabled us to do that and disrupt the market. And no one wants to simply say we can do this for a lower cost, right? That's compelling, but from a business perspective, we want to make sure that there's more to it than that. Again, going back to this idea of misconfiguration and user error, you can consult a number of different sources, but the numbers will be high. They'll probably start with the percentage that of a 9 and some number behind it of breaches that are caused by human error or misconfiguration or new devices, applications that weren't understood. So, but by using automation-enabled tools like the Fabric Management Center, in conjunction with something like Tufin with the orchestration suite, we can cut down on those number of errors dramatically. So I think that first and foremost provides something of a measurable delta. And firewalls have long been the primary device for defense in-depth strategies. But again, fine-tuning those, providing just the level of access required, and really focusing on that. So in the interest of time, you asked for the call to action, and I'll put those pieces that I have in here, and I'll try to make it concise, but really have a plan. I think that's crucial, that more and more CISOs and professionals are understanding that you have to have a plan for success and for failure. Update and patch systems. This should be just basic. It should be common hygiene. But really, every time I talk to anyone, I try to encourage that matters. And then isolation. Compute, data, users should be isolated, and they should have the least privilege. That's probably a moving target, but the least privilege they can have to enable consistent policy, consistent enforcement. Keep logs. keep those in an archive so know that they have them. Backups, have them. And test them. That's the other part that most organizations fail. Even if they do have backups, they say, oh, we have that. We don't really know if it's working. Something happened. In one of the most common breaches we see today is malware or ransomware. And that can be relatively easily averted if simply using a backup that's viable. And then update that plan. So have it and update it. And I'll hand it off from there.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And Ruben, same for you. Maybe one last question and then your ideas for a call to action. So how is Tufin strategically positioned to help our customers navigate the effects of uncertainties on the hybrid network?
Yeah, so, the fact that we are strategically positioned is in itself amazing. If you think at where we were 15 years ago with just some ideas and now used by some of the leading companies in the world. So, and I'm very proud to be able to contribute something to this discussion. And maybe to be more specific, a couple of things that we bring to the table with regards to hybrid networks, which is the future. So first of all, vendor neutral policies that are abstracted away from the underlying infrastructure, because the reality is digital transformation is not something that will happen and end. It's an ongoing thing and it's here to stay, right? The technology is accelerating and we're going to see more and more changes to the underlying infrastructure. So create that higher level abstraction of your security policies and derive your specific implementations from there. The other, as part of that, now you are in the position to extend your policies, security policies, and the processes behind them to the upcoming technology trends like cloud and Kubernetes. Very specifically, I think Kubernetes is a very interesting platform because we see it used not only on-premise and in the cloud, but also at the edge. And I've seen multiple examples of how people are using Kubernetes to host applications for very specific needs. And I believe that you'll see more and more of that, including OT and IoT. Also, the ability to automate security policies and build them into the other security, the business processes. Now, moving on to a call to action, I'll specify 3 things, and some of them overlap with John's comments as well. Maybe I'll start with the one that does overlap: least privilege at all levels. If you just remember, you need to remember one thing about security: it's least privilege, right? Everything, individuals, human beings, machines, processes, wind turbines, everything should have the least privilege that it can in order to do its job or function, and all other privilege should be stripped away from it. Again, as John mentioned, it's a moving target. It's a continuously changing environment, so build the business processes around that to always maintain the least privilege policies as much as possible. You can do that with automation. It's very difficult to do it manually. I would say it's impossible. And there is a great quote from Bruce Schneier, who said that many years ago that security is a process, not a tool. So integrate security into business processes. And more in the future, you're going to need to integrate them into the development processes as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the panelists, and I'd like to thank all the attendees for your participation in the event, but certainly Dr. Touche, John, and Ruben, thank you for your time. And we have been seeing some Q&A come through. We've been trying to answer them real time, but I do have one I'd like to, in the spirit of time, we only have a minute left, but potentially over to John. Can you describe how small businesses or startups could benefit from Fortinet security? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I tried to type a brief answer there in a reply, but really small businesses, we see tremendous traction, and one, because they're very cost sensitive, and we tend to be, really a good chosen vendor in that space. But they are usually easier to defend because of the lack of complexity, but also less able to recover from an incident. So we really view them as the most vulnerable. Many times, and there are statistics out there from, say, the Verizon breach report that talk about how many small businesses may never recover from a security event. If they suffer from ransomware or if they're breached, that may be enough to put the business out. And that's really just an ultimate shame. So we believe that you can enable that security fabric from the start and then grow easily and affordably with other elements as they grow on. So instead of just going out and buying a couple switches and routers and throwing packets around, we could start with a security core and then build secure as the company grows. So great question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do see that we've got another question here, but we're at the end of our hour and everyone's time is precious. So again, I want to thank the attendees. I want to thank the panelists specifically. Thank you, Dr. Touche, for joining us here today.
Yeah,
and this session will be available for replay. And if you have any other questions that could be directed to anyone here, please feel free to reach out, to me directly. I'm pam@tufin.com, and I'll make sure that the right person gets your question answered. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.